Welcome, dear listener. As you settle into a quiet space and let your breath slow, we invite you to drift gently backward in time, into a world colder, darker, and stranger than the one we know. A world of myth and memory, ... where gods walked among mortals, where monsters stirred in the shadows, and where the night was not always a place of rest. Tonight, we journey into the frost-bitten realm of Norse thought and belief, but not through battle cries or sagas of glory. No, this is a softer path, a quieter telling, one that moves slowly like snow falling on an ancient roof, one that invites you to sleep through the stories of long ago. The Norse people, who lived in the cold edges of Scandinavia over 1,000 years ago, believed deeply in the unseen. Dreams carried warnings, the wind carried voices, and the dark held eyes. This video is not about great battles or roaring gods. Instead, it is about stillness, about silence, about the way an ordinary person, wrapped in wool and worry, tried to sleep through a world that never truly slept. You'll hear of uneasy dreams in drafty barns of gods who tricked giants with impossible wagers of monsters, so vast they circled the world, and of those who walked the line between life and death, the quiet practitioners of Norse sorcery. So lie back. Let the flicker of a distant hearth fill your mind. Imagine the scent of pine smoke and old hay, and drift slowly and softly into the first part of our story. Close your eyes and imagine the scent of old straw. It's slightly damp, faintly earthy, and tinged with the musk of animals that have slept here longer than you. You are not in your bed, not in your own time, not even in your own century. You are in a barn on the outer edges of Norway, nearly 1,200 years ago. The night outside is cold, colder than anything you've known, and the sky, though clear, gives off no warmth. The stars are indifferent. The snow crunches under the weight of wolves, perhaps, or just the groaning of the trees. And you, a farmhand or perhaps a child, have been sent here to sleep. It is not uncommon. Space is limited. The longhouse is for elders, mothers with infants, warriors with wounds, and anyone deemed too important to risk freezing. But you are young, replaceable, expected to adapt. And so they've handed you a fur that smells of old sweat, pointed you to the barn, and muttered a half-hearted, "Stay warm," before returning to the hearth's glow. You are alone now, in a place meant for animals, but shared, according to every whisper you've ever heard, with something older. The barn groans in the wind, not in pain, but in memory. The beams creak with every gust, flexing as if sighing under invisible weight. The roof above is layered in moss and snow. Somewhere beyond the far wall, a cow shifts in her sleep, her breath huffing softly, warm against the cold. The sheep are quieter. Their eyes glow faintly in the dark, catching firelight that no longer exists. The chickens are still. Even the rats seem to have gone silent. You settle down in the hay, tucking your knees toward your chest, wrapping the fur tight around your body. It itches. It always itches. You scratch through layers of tunic and wool and dried skin, but it doesn't help. The cold finds the cracks in your clothing. It always does. It slips down your back, up your sleeves, around your neck. It does not bite out. It settles. It becomes a second skin. Not pain, exactly. Just discomfort so deep, it becomes part of you. You reach for the tiny tallow lamp tucked near your side. Its light is barely more than a trembling orange puddle. It throws shadows, not warmth. It does not chase the dark away. It only marks it more clearly. You can see now the pitchfork leaning in the corner, the curve of the cow's flank, the ragged shapes of dried herbs hanging above the doorway. The door itself has no lock, just a wooden bar, fitted into notches worn smooth by 1,000 nights of fear. No one ever says the barn is haunted. That would be too simple. What they say is, leave the bowl. A small bowl of grain or milk, set gently in the northeast corner, where the light never quite reaches. You were told to do it every night. You almost forgot tonight, but not quite. You left it there, a crude offering to something no one names anymore. Not gods, not demons, just the Vedder. The ones who are always here. Before people. Before barns. Before language. Maybe. You've never seen them. You don't want to. They don't like to be seen. They don't like to be disturbed. If they are satisfied, the night will be cold but uneventful. If they are displeased, your dreams may not be your own. Your grandmother used to say, if your dreams wander, don't follow them too far. She meant it literally. The Norse believed that the soul could leave the body during sleep. Not metaphorically, literally. A part of you, the hammer, could drift, could walk, could see. And sometimes ... could not find its way back. You pull the fur tighter around your legs. The hay pokes through. There's a broken sliver of twig somewhere beneath you, stabbing gently at your hip. You shift. The cow grunts, annoyed. You freeze. Time stretches differently here. Without clocks, there's no way to know if it's midnight or closer to morning. You count your breaths. You try to listen for change. But the wind, always the wind, keeps returning, rising, falling, whispering around the edges of the wood like it remembers something you forgot. In a dream once, or maybe it wasn't a dream, you heard footsteps in the rafters. Not above, where the snow lies thick, but inside, on the beams. Slow, deliberate, as though someone was walking a narrow plank just above your head. When you told your sister, she said it was just a bird, but she didn't look at you when she said it. Tonight, the silence is deeper, which is worse. It means the animals are listening too. The barn is breathing, quietly, with the sighs of wool and hooves and damp earth. You shut your eyes. You try to remember something comforting. A song, a story, a voice. You remember one tale, the one your uncle told after drinking too much mead. He said there was a creature, small and pale, with no face and 2 long fingers. It lived in barns. Only barns. It never spoke. It only watched. It sat in the corners and tilted its head. If you looked at it, you'd forget your own name. If you spoke to it, it would answer in your voice, but backwards. You told yourself it was a lie, but tonight, you do not open your eyes. You shift again, slowly, trying not to make sound. You tuck your hands into your armpits, press your legs together for warmth. You breathe through your nose. The air is sharp, filled with dust and fur and cold. You think of the longhouse, of your mother's hands, rough but warm, of the fire pit and the smell of cooked onions and boiling bones, of your brother's snores. Even those would be comforting now. But you are here, in the barn, in the dark. You are always here somehow. The stories say that barns remember every sleeper, that your breath joins the others who came before, that when you sleep here, you are not alone, not just because of spirits, but because of memory. Every straw holds a piece of someone's sigh. Every beam leans beneath the weight of dreams. You let your head rest back. The fur slides a little. The cold returns. Somewhere, a chicken stirs. Just once. Then silence again. You are still awake. And the night is just beginning. Sleep doesn't arrive in this place. Not the way it does in a bed warmed by a fire, under a roof layered in thatch and family. No, here, in the barn, sleep drifts like smoke. It hangs just above you, elusive, fickle. It waits for the wind to die down, for the last breath of the cow to fall quiet. It waits until your eyes stop searching the dark. Even then, it does not come gently. It settles like snow, not all at once, but flake by flake, slowly, heavily. And when it finally touches your chest, that first feeling of drifting, your body flinches. A twitch of the foot, A sudden awareness that you've gone too deep, too fast. That maybe, just maybe, something has followed you into the half-dream. The Norse called it Mara. You've heard the name before, whispered in stories, pressed between warnings and lullabies. She is not a woman, though she wears that shape. She is not a ghost, though she moves like one. She is not entirely a spirit, though she doesn't leave footprints. She comes when you sleep too far from the fire. She doesn't open doors. She seeps through cracks in the wood, through the knotholes in the beams, through the spaces in your breath. You will not hear her enter, but you might feel her. You might feel a pressure on your chest. Not heavy, not at first. Like a cat, perhaps, then more. A weight that tightens with each breath. You try to move. You try to speak. But your tongue is thick, and your limbs have turned to ice. You are no longer sure you are awake. Your eyes open. There is nothing there. But you know she was. The Mara doesn't visit everyone. She prefers the isolated, the forgotten, the ones too tired to defend their minds. She likes the quiet ones, the ones who don't fight back. And tonight, as the candle flickers its last, you wonder if you are one of them. Your grandmother told you how to protect yourself. Turn your shirt inside out before bed. Tie a piece of iron around your wrist. Whisper the name of your oldest ancestor 3 times. You forgot, of course. Or maybe you never believed. Until now. But it's too late. The barn is colder than it should be. Your breath no longer fogs the air. The animals are silent. Not sleeping. Not stirring. Just still. As if listening. As if they too know she's nearby. Still, you try. You focus on the rafters, tracing the lines of the beams with your eyes. You find the familiar notch above the door, the dangling tuft of sheep's wool caught in a splinter, the old iron nail someone hammered there generations ago. A ward, perhaps, though no one remembers what for. These are your anchors. Your hand grips the edge of your fur. You count your fingers. You whisper your own name, soft and slow. 3 times, like your grandmother said. And slowly, very slowly, the barn returns to its natural rhythm. A sheep shuffles. A breath stirs. A crack from the far wall. Just old wood shrinking in the cold. The Mara, if she came, is gone. But her dream remains. The Norse didn't treat dreams lightly. They were not illusions. They were warnings, messages, echoes, and sometimes doors. If you dreamed of drowning, it wasn't just fear. It meant something was being taken from you. Perhaps your freedom. Perhaps your reputation. Perhaps something worse. If you dreamed of wolves, it might be Fenrir. Not just a wolf. The wolf. The one who would one day kill the Allfather. The one bound by chains so strong, they were forged from impossible things. The roots of a mountain, the sound of a cat's footstep, the breath of a fish. To dream of Fenrir was to sense the approach of something unstoppable. If you dreamed of the dead, well, that was different. Some said it was comfort. A visit from loved ones, checking in. Others warned that if they spoke to you, truly spoke, it meant your soul was slipping toward them. Waking from such dreams could be difficult. The mind would hang between worlds, sluggish and damp, like moss in morning fog. Tonight, you dream, or think you do. You dream of whose? Of a horse without a rider, galloping across the sky. Its mane is made of storm clouds. Its hooves strike stars. You dream of the door creaking open, not violently, not with cold wind, but softly, carefully. You do not look. You do not want to see who stands there. You dream of a lullaby in a language you do not speak, though something inside you knows every word. When you wake, the candle is burned out. The barn is utterly dark, but you feel warm, just for a moment. Then the cold returns. You shift beneath your fur. Your joints are stiff, not from sleep, but from the tension of lying too still. A low pain runs from your hip to your ankle. The price of stone floors, an uneven straw. You sit up, slowly, carefully. The cow is awake, watching you. Her eyes reflect no light, just darkness. And then she turns away. You pull your fur tighter and lie back down. Sleep is not gone, just bruised. You close your eyes again, more careful this time. You slow your breath. You repeat the things that anchor you. Your name, your family's names, the scent of juniper, the shape of your father's boots, the feel of your brother's carved wooden comb. You remember the warmth of the hearth, the hum of voices, the smell of wood smoke on your mother's sleeves. These things are real. These things keep the Mara away. And slowly, the barn drifts again. The wind softens. The rafters do not creak. And for the first time in hours, perhaps, sleep begins to truly take hold. There is a moment in the night when time seems to pause. Not stop, not end, but simply hesitate, as if the world itself is holding its breath, unsure whether to continue the story or let it fade. You are lying there, still half wrapped in a tangle of fur and straw, not quite asleep, not quite awake. The animals have gone quiet again. The wind has stilled. Even the rafters no longer groan beneath the weight of snow. You can hear the faint crackling of wood, not firewood, but the barn beams themselves, slowly shifting with age and cold. You do not move. You do not even swallow. You know this silence. They call it the dead hour. That deep, black stretch between the last dream and the first bird. In Norse homes, this was when candles were left burning low, when the elders muttered charms, and when no one went outside unless they had no choice. Your body aches, but you dare not stir. Outside, the snow lies thick, not just in drifts, but in layers. Seasons of snowfall pressed down like stories, one atop the next. Somewhere beneath it, the ground sleeps too, and under that, bones, always bones. In a land this old, you are never far from them. You remember something now, something your father said, once, in passing, that the land itself remembers the dead. Not just the cairns, not just the stones, the land, the dirt, the trees, the wind. He told you that when you walk a familiar path and feel something strange, something out of place, it's not the weather. It's not a dream, it's memory. The land remembering someone who walked that way long ago. And maybe, sometimes, someone who never stopped walking. In the barn, dreams layer just like snow. Each one softens the one before. They do not vanish, they compress. You slip back into sleep. But this time, you're not alone. You see someone beside you, not close, but near enough. Not a figure you recognize, but not a stranger either. You cannot see their face, but you know they have been sleeping in this barn for centuries. Or perhaps it is you who has been sleeping that long. The barn stretches in your dream. The roof grows taller. The hay stacks into golden cliffs. The animals turn into stone. And the sky, through the rafters, is not night anymore. It's stars spinning far too quickly, like they are rushing toward something or away. You feel pulled. The dream changes. You're standing now on frozen ground, your feet bare. You hear distant drums, not music, exactly, but a rhythm that seems older than noise. A rhythm that makes your teeth ache. You turn. The barn is gone. In its place is a great hall. Not one of the gods. Not gold and glory. No, something simpler. A structure made of beams and wool, held together with belief and fear. You feel a breeze behind you, but there is no wind. Only breath. You wake again. You are still in the barn, but something feels moved. Not wrong, not missing, just moved. Your fur has slipped off one shoulder. The candle is still out, but you are warmer now somehow. And something is in your hand. You open your fingers slowly. A stone, no bigger than a hazelnut. Round, smooth, cold. You don't remember picking it up. You don't remember seeing it. You lie very still, holding it. The Norse believed in objects with memory. Not magical in the way of fairy tales, but imbued, touched. A stone could carry protection, or mischief, or even a message. Some stones were carved with runes. Others, never marked, carried power simply because of where they were found, in rivers, on grave mounds, beneath thunder-split trees. You don't know what this stone means, but you keep it anyway. You tuck it inside your shirt, where it rests near your chest, beneath the fabric. The barn creaks again, gently this time, as if approving. The cow sighs, the chickens stir. The world is waking, just slightly. This is the rhythm of barn nights in the north. They are not measured by clocks. They are not ruled by certainty. They are tides of silence and sound, cold and warmth, sleep and story. To sleep in a Norse barn alone is to learn patience, to become familiar with discomfort, with fear, with awe, with the weight of things that cannot be named. You are not meant to conquer the night. You are meant to survive it. And survival here is a kind of sacred skill, a quiet magic, the kind passed down not through books or spells, but through habit, through breath, through shared glances and unspoken rules. You know not to whistle in the barn. You know not to sleep facing the door. You know not to speak your dreams aloud before sunrise. You know these things not because someone taught them to you in a lesson, but because you live here. And here, the night teaches. You settle in again. You do not sleep deeply, but you sleep enough. And outside, behind the barn, the eastern sky begins its long, slow thaw. A grayness rising behind the distant trees. Morning, or something like it. The light comes slowly in the north. It does not burst. It does not rise with suddenness. It seeps, like mist curling beneath the door, like water under snow. It is not even light at first, only a slight paling of the shadows, a thinning of the dark. You notice it before you see it. The barn is no longer black, but gray. The outlines of objects become visible again. The pitchfork in the corner, the hanging herbs, the curled shapes of sleeping sheep. The cow blinks slowly, her breath puffing small clouds into the frost-thick air. You sit up. Your bones crack softly. Your back aches. The fur has shifted again in the night, and one foot is numb. You rub it back to life, slowly, patiently, without urgency. There is no rush. The day is not waiting for you. It arrives when it pleases. You stretch, gently. Roll your shoulders. Listen. No voices yet. No footsteps on the packed snow outside. Just the shifting of animals, and the distant call of a raven, deep, throaty, old. It is not quite morning, but it is no longer night. In Norse culture, the first moment of day held quiet significance. It wasn't just a beginning, it was a verdict. You had made it, past the cold, past the dreams, past whatever walked unseen between the hay bales and rafters. You had endured, and now you are allowed to rise. Not everyone did. Sometimes a man was found stiff with cold, his lips blue, his hands still clutching a knife beneath his tunic. Sometimes a child was found with eyes open, staring at something no one else could see. Sometimes nothing was found, but the animals refused to enter the barn for days. And everyone understood why. Surviving the night was never taken for granted. You rise now, 1 foot at a time, careful not to startle the animals. You fold your fur, more out of habit than discipline. It's damp along the edges. It will need drying later, by the fire. Your tunic clings to your skin, heavy with your own sweat, layered in a crust of salt and straw. You look to the northeast corner. The bowl of grain is gone, not spilled, not moved, gone. You blink. You step closer. There are no footprints in the dust. No signs of rat teeth or claws. Just a bare patch of floor. A circle of slightly warmer wood where the bowl used to sit. You swallow, and then calmly you step back. You do not speak. You do not question. You have been seen. That is enough. In many Norse households, it was customary to cleanse the barn after a hard night. Not in a modern sense. There were no brooms, no soap, but with presence, with sound, with breath. Later, someone, maybe your father, maybe the old woman with no teeth who speaks only in proverbs, will come to the barn doorway with a small bundle of herbs. Juniper, mostly, sometimes mugwort. A scrap of iron tied to a string. A stone taken from the hearth, blackened with soot. She will stand in the doorway and wave the smoke through the space, slowly, rhythmically, like stirring old soup. She will not say what she's doing. She will not explain. She doesn't need to. You'll leave the barn by then. You'll be outside, squinting at the low gray sun, watching your breath curl toward the sky like it's trying to return to the dream you left behind. You step outside now. The snow crunches under your foot, dry and brittle, not yet melting. The air is sharp, but cleaner than the barn. You inhale it deeply, despite the cold, and feel something in your ribs settle. A knot of tension you didn't know was there. The kind that only releases when you leave a place that watched you while you slept. The longhouse is ahead of you, maybe 30 paces away. Smoke curls from its roof hole, steady and pale. That means someone's awake. Likely your mother. She is stirring the fire. She has already begun the day. You walk toward the house slowly, not rushing. The cold bites at your face, but it is not cruel. Not today. As you approach the door, you look back once at the barn. It sits in the snow like a creature at rest, still but never asleep. Its beams are dark with age. Its door is slightly ajar, and you think, for just a moment, you see a shape in the upper loft. Something tall and still, watching you through the gaps in the wood. But when you look again, there is nothing. Just morning. Later, they will ask if you slept well. You'll nod. They won't believe you, but they won't press. Everyone lies about how they slept in the barn. It's one of the unspoken rules, like never leaving the offering bowl empty, never whistling after dark, never mocking the dreams of children, and never, ever, admitting what you saw just before dawn. You survived the night. That is enough. The door of the longhouse is warm. You press your palm against it for just a second before stepping inside. It's not that the wood itself holds heat, not in this weather, but what lies beyond it, is different. Alive, familiar, filled with the scent of broth and wool and ash. You hesitate, though, because stepping through that door means rejoining the world of the living, and part of you hasn't quite left the barn behind. Inside, your mother glances up. She doesn't ask where you were. She knows. Everyone knows. You nod to her. She nods back. It's all that's needed. The hearth burns low. Not in full flame, but steady. Red coals beneath a bed of ash. Someone has already stirred it this morning. Probably her. She keeps it alive even in sleep, rising sometimes in the dead of night to feed it, as though feeding a hungry spirit. Maybe she is. You sit near it now, but not too close. The others still sleep. Your brother curled beneath furs. Your uncle snoring softly. Your sister tucked behind a woven screen of linen. Their breath rises gently into the rafters, where it mingles with the smoke. You don't wake them. You just warm your hands. And try not to shiver. There is no praise for surviving the barn. No celebration. It is expected. You are not the first to sleep there. You won't be the last. Still, a part of you wants someone to ask. Not just, did you sleep? But what did you hear? What did you see? Did anything follow you back? But no one asks those things aloud, because the answers might stick. Words, after all, are dangerous. In the Norse world, spoken words have weight. A story, once shared, becomes real. An omen voiced aloud might bring it closer. A name whispered can summon. And silence, heavy, deliberate silence, is sometimes the safest language there is. So you sit, warming your hands, keeping your silence, and the house begins to wake. Your sister rises first. She doesn't speak either, just gives you a sideways glance, half curious, half knowing. She slept inside, near the hearth. Her cheeks are pink with warmth, her hair matted from comfort. You wonder if she dreamt, if she too saw the strange sky, the figure in the barn loft, the stone in your hand. But again, no words. You both move as if on tracks laid long before your birth. Folding blankets, stoking the fire, fetching water. Everything follows an old rhythm. Not just chores, but ritual. To keep the house alive. To keep the line between inside and outside clear. Outside is frost. Inside is breath. The work continues. At some point, your father emerges. Tall, quiet. His beard smells faintly of pine smoke. He doses to greet you. Greetings are for guests, but he places a carved wooden spoon in your hand and points toward the barn. You know what he means. The animals are stirring. They'll need to be fed. You feel your stomach sink slightly, though you hide it well. You just left that place, the barn, the dark, the eyes in the rafters. And now you must return. But this time, it is morning. The sun, weak though it is, now hangs above the mountains. And sunlight changes everything, doesn't it? You hope so. Back outside, the snow crunches once more beneath your boots. The sky is still heavy with clouds, but a few soft rays break through, like fingers reaching toward the earth. You follow your father's path in the snow, his boot prints pressed deep, still fresh. He walks ahead of you, carrying a bucket of oats. You carry another. The barn looks smaller now, less threatening, but not innocent, never innocent. You slide open the door and step inside, and once again, the smells return: hay, fur, dung, and something else, something that doesn't have a name. The animals greet you with familiar noise, a bleat, a snort, a shuffle of hooves. You feed them methodically, one by one. Your hands move, but your eyes scan, watching the corners, watching the loft, watching the bowl. It has not returned. Your father doesn't speak. He never does while in the barn. Only once years ago did he say something you remember. Never thank them out loud. Makes them think they're owed more. You weren't sure who they were, but you never asked. Now, as you pour the last of the oats into a wooden trough, your father turns. His eyes land briefly on yours. And though he doesn't say anything, you know he knows. Knows the barn changed you last night. Knows something passed through. He places a hand on your shoulder. And then just as quickly, he walks out into the snow. You follow after him, blinking against the pale sky. And something strange happens. Something subtle. You feel taller. Not older, not stronger, but more ... real. As if the cold sharpened your edges. As if surviving the barn made you slightly more visible to the world. It is not pride. It is not fear. It is just truth. And in this world, among snow and breath and silence, truth is enough. Before the fall of light, there was Baldur. He was not the strongest among the gods, nor the wisest, nor even the most adventurous. But he was loved, deeply, unanimously. And in the world of the Norse gods, a world of feuds and frost giants, of blood and oaths and battles that made him different, precious, vulnerable, Baldur was the son of Odin, the Allfather, and Frigg, the goddess of foresight and protection. His brothers were many: Thor with his storms and hammers, Hadr, quiet and blind, Vali and Vidar, sons of vengeance and silence. But it was Baldur who shone. His beauty was unmatched. His skin gleamed like polished ivory. His hair was golden, soft, never matted by war or wind. His voice soothed the fiercest gods and warmed the coldest halls. In Asgard, it was said that even the stones of the palace softened when he passed. He was light, and he was doomed. The signs came slowly, not with thunder, but with dreams. Baldur began to see things in his sleep, dark shapes, ash, a great ship burning at sea, a silence so vast it swallowed sound itself. He would wake in sweat, trembling, though no god could explain why. The dreams deepened, more vivid, more unbearable. And though he told no one at first, his mother knew. Frigg always knew. She confronted Odin, her voice taut with dread. "He is fading," she said, "and I do not know how to hold him." Odin said nothing, but that night he mounted Sleipnir, his 8-legged horse, and rode beyond the edge of the world, past Midgard, past Helheim, to a place not even gods dared linger. He descended to the realm of the dead, searching for truth. There, in the halls of hell, he found a seeress, old and bound in shadow, her eyes shut to the living. She spoke to him without looking. "I know why you have come," she said, "and the answer is already written." "What will happen?" Odin asked. She told him, "Baldur will die, by the hands of one who does not know what he does. His death will be the beginning of the end, the first crack in the walls of fate, the whisper before the storm." Odin returned to Asgard in silence. Frigg refused to accept it. She, unlike her husband, did not sit and brood beneath ravens. She acted. She traveled across the 9 realms, pleading and commanding. From flame to frost, from mountain to root, she extracted promises. "Swear," she said, "that you will never harm Baldur." And everything swore. The stones, the trees, the beasts, the metals and diseases and poisons. Even fire and water gave their word. Nothing would harm him. Not steel, not ice, not claw, not tooth. Baldur became untouchable, and the gods rejoiced. They made sport of it. They would throw spears at him, hurl axes, shoot arrows. All would bounce off harmlessly. Baldur would stand in the center, laughing gently, radiant. He became a game, an emblem of their invincibility. But something watched in the shadows, and waited. In the halls of Asgard, there was one god who did not laugh, one who did not throw anything at Baldur, one who watched the games with sharp eyes and a slow smile. Loki. He was not like the others, never was. Blood brother to Odin, yet not born of gods. A shapeshifter, a speaker of riddles, a walker of lines too thin to see. He did not weep when Baldur laughed. He did not cheer when arrows missed their mark. Instead, he whispered. And one day, he whispered to Frigg. Not directly, of course. He came in disguise. A frail old woman, stooped and toothless, weaving thread beside her fire. He asked about Baldur, about the protections, about the oaths sworn. And Frigg, perhaps tired, perhaps lonely, answered kindly. "All things have sworn," she said. "He is safe." All swore. "Even mistletoe?" the old woman asked softly. Frigg blinked. "No, not the mistletoe. It is too young, too small. I did not ask it." And the old woman nodded and vanished. There was a tree near the edge of Asgard. Not grand, not old. A slender thing, more a shrub than a tree, growing quietly where others had not. It was mistletoe, thin, pale-stemmed, its leaves soft and light as breath. It had never sworn the oath. Frigg had passed it by, and Loki had not forgotten. He cut it with care, using a blade made not of iron but of silence. He shaped it into a dart, not an arrow, not a spear, but something in between. A sliver, barely longer than a finger. barely sharp enough to pierce cloth. Then, Loki walked back to the games. The gods were gathered, laughing as always, taking turns hurling objects at Baldur, who stood calmly, eyes half closed, amused but never afraid. Steel clanged off his chest. Fire wrapped around him and vanished. A boulder bounced off his shoulder with a dull thud. Loki approached Hodr, Baldur's blind brother. Hodr sat to the side, smiling softly at the sound of laughter, but never joining in. He could not see. He had never thrown anything. "Why do you not take part?" Loki asked gently. His voice was smooth as melting snow. "Because I cannot see," Hodr said. "I cannot aim." "I will guide your hand," Loki replied. "Would you like that? So you too can honor Baldur?" Hodr hesitated, then nodded. And so Loki placed the mistletoe dart in Hodr's palm. He lifted Hodr's arm, aimed it, and whispered, "Now." The dart flew. It did not bounce. It did not vanish. It pierced. Baldur staggered. His mouth opened as if to speak, but no sound came. Then he fell. The laughter stopped. For a long moment, no one moved. The gods stared, unmoving, unbreathing, as if the air had been stolen from the world. The dart was still lodged in Baldur's chest. A single drop of blood welled up around it, impossibly red, impossibly still. Frigg screamed, and the sky went gray. The gods rushed forward, too late. They lifted him, shook him, called his name, but Baldur's eyes were already closed. His skin, once so bright, had dulled. His lips had turned pale, and the light was gone. They did not understand at first. How could they? Nothing was meant to harm him. Nothing was allowed. But Loki was already gone, disappeared into the wind, into shadow, into silence. And Hodr, poor Hodr, sat with his hands limp in his lap, weeping without knowing why. Thor struck the ground in fury. The mountains trembled. Even the roots of Yggdrasil shook with the grief of the gods. Odin said nothing. He stood still, eyes narrowed, as if already seeing the end, because he had. They prepared the body with reverence. Baldur was laid upon a great ship, Ringhorni, the largest ever built. His wife, Nanna, fell upon his chest and died of sorrow. She was placed beside him. The ship was pulled to the shore and filled with treasures, with flowers, with tokens of love from every god and creature who had ever known his name. Then they tried to push the ship into the sea, but it would not move. Not even Thor, strongest of the gods, could budge it. It was as if the earth itself refused to let Baldur go. So they summoned a giantess, Hyrrokin, from the land of ice. She arrived riding a wolf with vipers for reins. With a single touch, she shoved the ship into the water. Waves crashed, fire rose, and the pyre was lit. Baldur sailed into the horizon, flames licking the sky as the gods watched in silence. And something in the world grew cold. Baldur did not rise from the flames. The gods waited. Even after the fire faded, even after the waves swallowed the last of Hringhorni's ashes, they stood by the shore, silent, unmoving, watching the horizon as if something might return, but nothing did. Baldur was gone, and the world was dimmer. He descended gently into hell, not with screams, not with fury, but like a feather falling into water. Hell was not a place of fire and torment. It was colder than that, slower, a realm of stillness. Its walls were high, its halls made of shadow and stone, and its queen, Hel, daughter of Loki, ruled not with cruelty, but with distance. She met Baldur with no joy, no sadness, only calm. "You do not belong here," she said softly. "I know," he answered, and still he stayed, because the dead do not choose. Back in Asgard, Odin could not rest. His dreams were empty. The ravens brought no comfort. The world had tilted, and even the Allfather could not correct it. So once more, he called for Sleipnir. Once more, he rode into the deep places. Not to bargain this time, but to understand. He arrived at Hel's gate and asked to see his son. Hel permitted it. She had no reason not to. There, in the cold light of her hall, Baldur sat, peaceful but not quite alive. His eyes were open, but they did not shine. His voice was soft, but did not echo. Odin looked upon him and felt, for the first time in many centuries, small. The gods held council. They had to try. If even one thing could be done to bring Baldur back, it must be done. Frigg stood before the assembly and made a plea, a mother's plea, heavy with loss and hope. She asked that messengers be sent to every corner of the 9 realms, to gods, giants, dwarves, mortals, spirits, beasts, and that each be asked the same question: will you weep for Baldur? If everything in creation shed a tear, Hel had sworn she would release him, and so they went. The tears came easily. The wind wept in the mountains. The trees wept in the forests. Stones, animals, rivers, even things without eyes, found a way to grieve. The frost melted. The clouds dimmed. Creatures who had never spoken before lifted their voices in mourning. It seemed certain he would return. But in a cave far beyond the reach of most gods, the messengers found a giantess. She was old, wrinkled, her eyes sunken, her shoulders bent. Her name was Thik. They asked her, as they had asked all others, will you weep for Baldur? She looked at them slowly and said, let Hel keep what she has. She did not cry, and with that, the trial failed. Some say Thik was Loki in disguise. Others say she was older than time and colder than fate. It doesn't matter. Baldur would not return. The door had closed. After the final tear fell and failed, something shifted in the air above Asgard. It wasn't loud. It wasn't sudden. But it was certain. As if the tree that held all worlds had lost a root. As if a thread had snapped somewhere in the weaving of fate, and no one could quite say which one. Only that something now hung loose. The gods returned to their halls, quieter than before. They still drank, still hunted, still built great things. But laughter didn't last as long. Music didn't ring as brightly. Even Thor, loudest among them, seemed slower to rise in the morning. It wasn't grief that haunted them. It was a knowing. A distant drumbeat, slow and soft, echoing from the far end of time. Baldur was gone, and something was coming. They turned their eyes to Loki. The trickster had vanished, of course. He was wind, shadow, flame. He could be a fish, a woman, a bird, a child. He could vanish between words. For a while, he succeeded. He hid in forests, behind waterfalls, in caves too deep to echo. But he could not hide forever. The gods hunted him, and they found him. Beneath the earth, in a crevice blacker than sleep, they dragged him out. He laughed, even then. Not with joy, but with defiance. With the bitter smile of one who knew how the story would end. They bound him in chains made of his own son's entrails. They pinned him to the rocks. Above him, they hung a serpent, its fangs dripping poison. The venom fell drop by drop onto his face, burning like stars made of acid. And there he stayed, twisting, screaming, waiting. His wife, Sijin, remained beside him. She held a bowl to catch the poison, shielding him for as long as she could. But the bowl would fill, and when she turned to empty it, even for a breath, the poison struck. That was when the earth shook. That was when volcanoes groaned. That was when trees cried out without wind. The pain of Loki, chained in the dark, became part of the world's rhythm. A reminder, a warning. And Baldur? He waited too. In Hel's hall, he sat among the quiet dead. But he did not decay. He did not fade. He simply remained, still beautiful, still gentle, untouched by time. A ghost of light waiting in the land of shadows. It is said that when Ragnar comes, the end of all things, Baldur will rise. He will walk once more among green fields. He will bring light to the new world that follows fire. But that world is not this one. Not yet. In the end, the death of Baldur was not just a tragedy. It was a hinge, a turning of the sky. The daylight faded was not loud, not bloody, not even final. But it was the day the gods first felt the cold breath at the end. And from that day forward, even in the golden halls of Asgard, no one truly slept without dreams. There is a tree that binds the worlds. It is not like the trees we know, not rooted in soil, not reaching toward the sun. It grows through the bones of the cosmos. Its branches stretch into the heavens. Its roots twist through shadow. Its trunk holds the weight of all things that are, and all things that were, and all things yet to come. The Norse called it Yggdrasil, the world tree. To stand near it was to feel time stretch, to hear whispers in the bark, to see movement in stillness. It was not alive in the way a deer is alive. It was older, slower, and in its presence, even the gods stepped carefully. It stood in the center of everything, and high in its branches, one god made a choice that changed the fate of all. Odin, the Allfather, ruler of Asgard, keeper of ravens and secrets, was not born with knowledge. He chased it, hungered for it. Not just wisdom in battle or speech, but deep knowledge, the kind that lives beneath language, the kind that moves through shadow and dream. He knew power could be taken by force, but wisdom? That had to be earned. And he wanted it all. The secrets of fate, the hidden runes, the songs that shaped the world. So he went to the world tree, and he brought with him nothing. No crown, no armor, only a rope and a spear. There is no clear path to climb Yggdrasil. It is not a ladder. It does not welcome travelers. But Odin did not need a road. He was not walking with his feet. He was walking with his will. And so he climbed. Not quickly, not high, not toward any particular branch. Just inward, through wind and darkness, through silence that bent the air, until he reached a place where the bark was smooth, and the sky was far away, and the roots of the tree began to tremble in his blood. There he stopped, and without a word, he drove his spear into his own side. It was not a clean wound. The blade was old, the edge imperfect. It tore. He did not cry out. He looped the noose around his neck, and he hanged himself, not as punishment, not as martyrdom, as sacrifice. He hung there for 9 nights. No food, no drink, no rest, no comfort from his wife, Frigg, no whispers from his ravens, no healing from his sons. He dangled in silence. The wind clawed his face. The bark scraped his back, and the spear stayed in his side, pulsing with each heartbeat. He did not flinch. He stared down into the darkness below, not below in space, but below in soul, below the worlds, into the deep roots of Yggdrasil, where secrets were not spoken, but grown, where runes slept like seeds beneath the soil. And he waited. The first night passed like a blade through fog. No dreams, no voices, only cold. Not the kind that comes from snow, but the kind that creeps in from the spaces between thoughts. Odin dangled there, eyes open, watching a sky that did not move. No stars, no moon. Just the silent, breathing dark of the cosmos heart. He thought about breath, how strange it was, how easily lost. He thought about the first time he had ridden Sleipnir, the sound of hoofbeats across the Bifrost. He thought of his mother's voice, though he could not remember her face. And then he stopped thinking, because even thoughts are a luxury when you are offering yourself to the unknown. By the second night, the pain changed. It no longer felt like a spear in his side. It became something else, an ache in the ribs of the world, a shadow wrapped around the lungs of existence. His body had grown heavy, but it did not pull him down. Instead, he felt himself becoming light, weightless, unreal. There were moments he forgot who he was. Odin, king, father, God. They were just sounds now, floating like dust through the branches above. He was something else, not yet a spirit, not yet a secret, just an offering in the wind. On the third night, the dreams began. But they were not dreams as we understand them. There were no stories, no shapes, just impressions. A hammer made of ice that never struck. A river that flowed backward through bone. A raven with too many wings. A tree growing upside down, its leaves made of silence. He saw a woman, faceless, sewing something into the sky. He saw his own shadow kneel before something too large to see. He saw the runes, not yet words, not yet marks. Just motion, just memory. And for a moment, he almost wept. But tears do not fall when you hang between worlds. The fourth night was hunger, not for food, not for drink, but for meaning. His stomach had long since stopped aching. His throat was dry beyond recognition. But the hunger was different now, a kind of spiritual starvation. The ache of not knowing, the terror of sensing that knowledge was near, but not yet his. He reached, though his hands did not move. He called out, though no sound escaped his mouth. Still the tree did not answer. Still the darkness watched. Still the runes waited. By the fifth night, Odin no longer knew if he was awake or asleep. The line had blurred. What was body? What was bark? The feeling of his flesh had dulled to nothing. Only the wind remained, soft and constant, brushing across his face like the breath of a forgotten god. He could not move. He did not need to. Motion belonged to the living. And Odin was no longer sure he belonged to that world. He began to notice things not with his eyes, but with something deeper, some root of awareness, sunk below language. He saw the pulse of the tree, slow, immense, older than stone, older than night. It moved not like blood, but like thought. Each beat was a memory. Each crack in the bark held a whisper. Not in words, not yet, but in something like intent, something like song. And still, the runes did not rise, not yet. The sixth night brought a strange peace, not comfort, not safety, just stillness. He began to forget pain. It wasn't that the spear no longer hurt. It was that it had become part of him, a second spine, a truth embedded beneath the ribs. He had offered himself to the tree, and the tree had begun to reshape him. There were moments he heard music, not from above, not from below, from within. A low, unbroken tone, like ice cracking beneath water, like bone being carved by wind. A sound not meant to be heard with ears. It hummed behind his eyes. It grew louder when he stopped trying to understand. He thought briefly of the gods back home, of Thor, impatient, pacing near the Bifrost, of Frigg, silent by the fire, hands folded, knowing too much, of Heimdall, standing still at the edge of the worlds, waiting for a change in the wind. They could not see him now. No one could. He was further than thought, deeper than prayer. He had crossed a threshold, and the runes, somewhere beyond skin and shadow, were beginning to stir. By the seventh night, the silence was no longer empty. It had weight now, thick and slow, like fog inside the lungs. Odin did not speak. He could not. His tongue had grown heavy, useless. His voice, once the sound that shaped oaths and kings, had gone quiet. But something else was speaking, not with sound, not in words. It began as a feeling behind his ribs, a pressure, like water swelling beneath ice, as if something wanted out or wanted in. The line was unclear. His body, suspended and still, was no longer just a vessel of pain. It had become a door, and something was beginning to knock. He opened his inner sight, that part of him that had long stopped needing eyes. And there, at the edge of the dark, he saw them. The runes, not carved, not inked, not taught, living. They floated in the black like embers, slow turning, humming in patterns older than speech. They had no names yet, but each held meaning, not explained, but felt. One buzzed like ice melting in spring. Another thrummed like footsteps on hollow stone. Another pulsed with grief so ancient it had no owner. They drifted closer, but they did not offer themselves freely. Odin understood. This was no gift. This was a test. Knowledge in this world was not given. It was taken, not with violence, but with surrender. These runes had not waited all this time to be captured by curiosity. They answered only to sacrifice. And so, once more, he reached not with hand or eye or thought, but with ache, with the marrow-deep truth that he had given everything, his name, his breath, his place among the living. And slowly, one rune moved. It stopped before him. It shimmered, and it entered him. It did not hurt. Not in the way the spear had hurt. Not in the way hanging by the neck had hurt. This was something quieter, like cold water poured into an already frozen body, like memory being rewritten beneath the skin. He felt it curl behind his ribs, nestle beside his spine, settle like a seed, and with it came understanding. Not full, not sharp, but enough. The first truth had been planted, and more were coming. By the 8th night, Odin no longer remembered the sound of his own name, not because it had been forgotten, but because it had been laid down. Names belonged to the world below, to the places where things could be pointed at, claimed, spoken aloud. But here, in the branches above time, identity meant very little. He was not Odin now. He was offering. He was question. He was hunger suspended in wind. More runes came. They did not rush. They approached with the slowness of stone, the caution of gods who had watched stars be born and fade. Each one moved with purpose. None were alike. The second rune sang with heat, not fire, but friction. The rub of effort, the press of will against resistance. It spoke of trials, of learning not through answers, but through struggle. It whispered, nothing freely gained is worth keeping. It slid into him like a brand. He did not cry out. The third rune was quiet, a spiral, turning in on itself. It pulsed with secrecy, with hidden doors and veiled truths. It showed him a locked box that could only be opened with silence. He understood. Some truths are protected not by gates, but by confusion. The rune settled behind his heart. Each rune was not just a symbol. It was a law. Not laws written by kings, but older ones. The kinds of truths that shaped rivers, that told bones how to grow, that whispered to time when to move forward. He received a rune of betrayal, jagged and sharp, but necessary. He saw that even the break of trust had its place in the world's weaving. It carved deeply into him, cold as regret. He received a rune of birth, soft and luminous, made of breath and pain and waiting. It circled his spine and hummed. He received a rune of death, not an end, but a transformation. It did not enter him gently. It broke through, and he let it. As the runes joined him, he did not grow stronger. He grew heavier, wiser, yes, but also burdened. For each truth carried a price, not one he could pay now, but one that would echo forward, through the fates of his sons, through the fall of Asgard, through Ragnarok. The knowledge he was gaining would not save him. It would simply make him ready. The 9th night came without a beginning. There was no shift in the wind, no change in light, just a deeper stillness, as if the entire tree had gone quiet to watch, as if even the stars had paused their slow drift to see whether Odin would rise or vanish. His breath was shallow now, thin. It did not move his chest so much as stir the air just barely. His heartbeat was not steady. It came and went like a fading drum, echoing farther away with each beat. His hands hung limp. His body sagged. The spear remained lodged in his side, a cold memory of flesh. But his mind was sharp, sharper than it had ever been. He felt the runes inside him, dozens now, each humming its own truth. Not like a choir, but like a forest. Each tree distinct, each leaf singing alone, and yet together forming something vast. He did not command them. He did not own them. He carried them, like scars, like children, like fire inside frost. And still, one rune remained. It did not come as the others had. It did not float. It did not hum. It appeared beneath him, deep below, in the roots of the tree, buried in soil that had never been touched, in silence that had never been heard. He did not see it with eyes. He felt it, as one feels the presence of an answer, long before the question is asked. It was not a rune of knowledge, not of power. It was the rune of sacrifice itself. To receive it, he had to let go of everything. Not just body, not just breath, not just the names of things, but the will to return, to live again, to speak, to teach, to remember. This rune asked for surrender without promise. It offered no reward, only the chance to become something more, or nothing at all. And Odin, still hanging by the neck, pierced by his own spear, surrounded by truths heavier than death, said yes. It entered him not as a symbol, but as a collapse. He fell inward, past memory, past shape, past meaning, and for one brief, soundless moment, he was not a god, not a being, just silence. And in that silence, the rune spoke. It told him nothing. It showed him everything. He saw the end of things, the great fire, the breaking of bonds, the serpent uncoiled, the wolf unchained. He saw the gods fall. He saw his son scream. He saw the tree burn. And then he saw something after. A field. A soft light. A second beginning. He gasped, and the rope snapped. When the rope snapped, the world did not make a sound. There was no thunder, no quake, no sudden gasp from the heavens. Only wind, only the faint creak of bark, only the hush that follows a breath held too long. And Odin fell. He did not fall far. He did not crash to earth. He did not tumble through the sky. He simply descended, like a leaf releasing itself after the end of summer, like a sigh returning to the lips that gave it. Slowly, quietly, he came down from the tree that knows all things. Not because he climbed, and not because he willed it, but because the tree was done with him, and it let him go. The bark that scraped his back as he returned was no longer rough. It was familiar now. He knew its curves, its ridges, its warmth. He had hung in its embrace for 9 nights, and it had whispered to him, carved into him, swallowed him, and remade him. He was not a stranger now. He was part of its memory. The bark recognized him as one of its own. When his feet touched the earth again, he did not stumble. His legs should have failed. His wounds should have screamed. His chest should have heaved with the return of breath. But they didn't. There was pain, yes, but it had shifted. It was no longer torment. It was structure. It was the skeleton of the truths he now held. His pain was part of the runes, and they held him up. He looked around. The forest was still. Branches overhead swayed with a wind that no longer touched him. The ground beneath him was soft and cool. No beasts stirred. No birds called. The sky was the same dull gray it had always been. And yet he saw it differently now. Because now he could see the lines. Faint, nearly invisible. But everywhere, threads, some golden, some black. some pulsing like veins. They stretched from root to stone, from leaf to cloud, connecting all things. Some were tangled, some frayed, some vibrating with what might come next. The runes in his body, no longer symbols, but truths, pulsed in answer. They could read these threads. They could feel the flow of fate moving through them. And Odin understood. He had not just gained knowledge. He had gained vision. But with that vision came weight. He felt the burden of it almost at once. The tension that comes not from movement, but from knowing. He could no longer look at a broken branch without sensing the echo it would cause 100 years from now. He could no longer meet the eyes of another god without glimpsing what their end might be. He could no longer pretend that time moved in only one direction. The world had opened, and it would never close again. He began to walk, not toward anywhere in particular. There was no path beneath his feet, only moss, root, and loam. But he moved with purpose. Each step was slow, deliberate, as though the ground itself needed time to adjust to his return. He did not limp. He did not wince. But something in him had changed the way he touched the world. It was as though the earth no longer resisted his weight. It accepted him, folded around his footsteps like water around stone. Birds did not flee from his approach. Leaves did not stir. Even the wind circled around him in quiet curiosity, unsure of what he now was. After a time, though time had no meaning in that forest, he heard the wings. They came not from above, but from all directions at once. First a whisper, then a beating, then silence, and then hugging. He landed first, the thought raven, circling once, then settling on a low branch just above Odin's shoulder. His feathers, once dark and sharp, seemed now to shimmer faintly, as if each was inked with a letter not yet read. His head tilted, watching. Then Munin, the memory raven, slower, heavier, more hesitant. He circled twice before landing. He did not speak, not with sound. But Odin felt it, the gentle wave of recognition, the warmth of memory not from the past, but from what had just been born. They did not call, they did not flap, they simply looked. And Odin looked back. He did not command them. He did not ask questions. There was no need, because he now understood that thought and memory were not birds who served him, but reflections of him, extensions, vessels that once carried pieces of his mind and now returned to him filled with something far older, something that hummed with runes. They leapt to his shoulders, one on each side. He felt no weight, only balance. And for the first time since his fall, Odin opened his mouth, not to speak, but to breathe. The air tasted different now, thicker, more layered. It no longer simply filled his lungs. It carried messages, secrets, runes in vapor form, drifting through pine and cloud. He inhaled, and he read it. The way a seer reads bones, the way a child reads warmth in the arms of a parent. This was his world now, and his task was only just beginning. The forest did not end. It simply faded. Tree by tree, the dense canopy loosened. Moss thinned to grass. The sacred hush of Yggdrasil's domain gave way to the faint rustling of the outside world. But Odin did not cross a boundary. He passed no gate, no threshold. The sacred and the mundane no longer lived apart, not to him. Because now he saw the sacred everywhere. A fallen branch was no longer just wood. It was breakage, a rune of endings and chances unmade. A stone in the path was not just a stone. It was resistance, a symbol of pause, choice, and consequence. Even the wind that brushed past his face carried messages now, shifts in intention, echoes of voices far beyond earshot. He did not hear them as sound, but felt them behind his ribs, in the same place where the runes now rested like soft embers. The world, once something to command, now read to him like a vast living book. He walked slowly, not because he was weak, but because everything was heavy, not in burden, in meaning. The birds above, once just birds, now moved in patterns that mirrored ancient glyphs. The clouds, once just sky's decoration, shifted like old prophecies, rearranging themselves for a new age. And with every step, Odin felt them watching. Not mortals, not even the gods, but forces, ideas, possibility itself. The runes inside him pulsed in quiet rhythm, not guiding him, but responding to the world with each footfall, like a harp vibrating to a song it remembers from before time began. He reached the foot of the Bifrost, long before Asgard came into view. It shimmered faintly in the mist, that bridge of color and sound connecting the realms, a threshold between might and mystery. He did not cross it right away. Instead, he stood still and looked back. He could not see the tree from here, but he could feel it, not just behind him, but within him, towering, ancient, still whispering. He had left its branches, but he had not left it. Yggdrasil was no longer a destination. It was part of his blood. And Asgard, that golden realm of gods and glory, would not recognize what was coming home. The Bifrost did not blaze with color as he crossed. It shimmered, yes, but faintly, like a memory of what it once was. Each step rang out not with thunder, but with a hush, like footsteps inside a cathedral. Heimdall saw him coming long before he reached the gate. But the watchman did not call out. He simply stared, eyes wide, hands unmoving. There was something in Odin's face now, or perhaps behind it, that made speech unnecessary. Heimdall, guardian of worlds, who heard the grass grow and the wool move on sheep's backs, said nothing. And Odin nodded in return. Asgard was quiet, not in mourning, not in sleep, but in a kind of pause, as though the whole realm sensed a shift it could not name. Gods halted mid-sentence as he passed. Warriors lowered their spears without realizing. Servants forgot what they were carrying. Even Thor, loudest among the halls, fell into stillness as Odin entered the palace. He was thinner now, not frail, but carved. His wounds had not closed, but no longer bled. The spear wound glowed faintly, pulsing with the rhythm of something older than pain. His eyes were dimmer, and yet somehow deeper, as if they now stared through 10 layers of time. And he did not speak. Frigg met him in the great hall. She did not run to him. She did not fall into his arms. She only looked, long, soft, and he looked back. And in that silence, more passed between them than could ever be said. She knew what had happened, not in detail, but she knew the scent of death, the rhythm of rebirth. She had seen it in dreams, and she feared what it might cost, but she did not ask, because even a queen must let the sacred speak first. Later, when the others gathered, Baldur, Freya, Tyr, Sif, they sat in the mead hall, waiting for Odin's voice, but he did not raise it. Instead, he drew in the air, not with hands, but with presence, and the first rune bloomed. It hung there, glowing faintly, a shape made not of light, but of meaning, a curve of fate, a hook of memory, a thorn of will. And though no one had ever seen it before, they understood, not fully, but deeply. That was the beginning, not of magic, not of spellcraft, but of language, the language of the gods, of the earth, of thought made shape. The runes were not tools, they were keys, and Odin was their first keeper. He did not give the runes away. He taught them, slowly, quietly, to those who could bear their weight, to those who asked not for power, but for meaning. He taught a few to Frigg, who already knew the language of dreams. She took them gently and hid them in her weaving, where no warrior would think to look. He gave one to Tyr, a rune of law, of balance held even in violence. Tyr pressed it into the hilt of his sword, though no one else could see it there. He showed another to Freya, A rune of desire, not as fire, but as gravity, the quiet pull between all living things. She braided it into her hair, where it pulsed with every heartbeat. But most of all, he gave them to seers. To the Volar, the wandering women of fate who lived at the edges of forest and town, who dreamed beneath fur blankets and whispered to the earth. They needed no temples, no altars, only silence. To them, he gave the deep runes. Not the bright, sharp marks of kings, but the older ones, the crooked truths, the broken symbols that sang in riddles and wept in firelight. He gave them not with parchment, but with breath, with look, with shadow, and they remembered. Soon, the runes began to echo through Midgard, in the scratching of birch bark, in the crack of bone tossed into fire, in the way a mother whispered over a sick child, in the carved stones that watched over graves. They were not spells. They were structures, skeletons of thought, frameworks for prophecy, threads that pulled dreams into shape. And Odin? He watched, not as a god above, but as something between. He wandered the worlds, never staying long, listening, learning, shaping. He asked questions he already knew the answers to. He whispered riddles to children. He left symbols in places no one would find for generations. The runes had not made him king. They had made him keeper, and the burden of keeping was endless. He knew what was coming. The fire, the wolf, the serpent, the tree cracking at the roots. He saw it every time he closed his eyes. But he also saw after. A field, a child's breath, a single blade of grass growing where none had before. He did not smile. He did not weep. He only walked. And with every step, the runes moved in silence. Inside him, beside him, through him, not as weapons, but as witnesses. The sacrifice was done, but the price was only beginning. There is a realm where hunger does not reach, where the wind does not bite, where fire is not feared but honored, where the mead flows without end, and where death, even when it comes, is only a pause before another feast. They called it Asgard. Not a city, not a village, not even a kingdom, but something higher, set apart, floating beyond reach on the fabric of the 9 realms. It was not built by hands. It was woven from intention, shaped by thought, and bound together by stories more than stone. To arrive, there was to step out of the world you knew. The halls were vast, but never empty. Gold shimmered not as wealth, but as warmth, in the corners of the beams, in the tips of the goblets, in the braids of the servants who did not age. Torches burned with blue flame that never smoked. The air tasted faintly of apples and metal, like a memory of sunlight folded into mist. There were no kings in Asgard, only gods. But even among them, there were lines, soft, unspoken, but drawn all the same. At the head of every gathering was Odin, quieter now after the tree, but still watching, still measuring, still weighing what must be paid. Thor laughed louder than the others. He drank deeper, sang more quickly, threw bones across the floor, and boasted of battles yet to come. But when Odin's eye met his, he quieted, just for a moment, just long enough to remember where they were. Frigg moved through the hall like a breath through silk. She did not command, but she arranged. Goblets would slide a little closer to guests about to grow tired. Cloaks would fold themselves. Servants would step aside before being noticed. The hall bent around her, not out of fear, but out of knowing she already understood what was needed. And then there was Loki. He did not sit far from the throne, but always just to the side, not out of deference, but mischief. His laughter was thinner, sharper, like wind through a crack in the door. He smiled often, but his hands never rested, always fiddling, twisting, preparing. The others watched him, even when they didn't admit it. Feasts in Asgard were not held once a year, or even once a week. They were constant, a rhythm, like breathing. Food appeared when it was needed, platters never emptied. Meat that had been eaten would regrow on the bone. Cups, once drained, refilled themselves. There was no signal to begin, no host announcing the hour. Just a low hum of voices, laughter, the scrape of chairs, and the quiet ring of steel behind silk. The gods did not eat to survive. They ate to remember what it meant to want. And yet, even in all their power, in all their comfort, there were shadows at the edges of the hall. Not physical, not ghosts, but dread. The kind that comes not from fear of loss, but from knowing that even this would not last forever. In Asgard, there was no sunrise in the way mortals knew it. Light did not push back the dark. It simply gathered slowly, like breath returning to lungs. The halls of the gods did not greet the morning with urgency. There was no rush to till fields, no carts to load, no cries from hungry children. Time here was not a rope pulling forward. It was a circle. And each day repeated not out of routine, but out of reverence for the way things had always been. The first to stir were often the servants of Frigg, spirits of order and care, whose names were rarely spoken, but whose presence shaped the very softness of Asgard's morning. They walked not on feet, but on intention, gliding across the great hall to lay fresh linens, to light the oil lamps that never truly went out, and to arrange bowls of fruit from orchards that bore no seasons. These apples, golden, heavy, still dewed with memory, were the fruit of Idun, goddess of eternal youth. Her magic did not shout. It pulsed quietly, steadily, through every surface of the realm. Without her, age would remember the gods. With her, they simply remained. After the fruit was touched, but not eaten, the hearth began to hum. Not roar, not blaze, just hum. A gentle, low vibration of warmth from deep beneath the stone floors where sacred embers never died. It was here that Thor would often arrive, long before any feast began. Not out of hunger, but out of pattern. He would sit beside the hearth, still as stone, Gyllenir resting across his knees like a sleeping dog. No one spoke to him then. These were the moments when the thunder god became small, not weak, but inward. His strength, loud as it could be, needed silence to settle. Elsewhere, Freya would rise, not in her hall, but often in the gardens that surrounded it. She walked barefoot through dew-soaked grass that recognized her touch. Her cloak of feathers never dragged. It floated beside her like mist. She spoke to no one in the morning, not out of coldness, but because the morning spoke to her. Flowers bent slightly as she passed, not bowed, just leaned, as if curious. Her hands would brush the petals of things not found in Midgard. Blue fire roses, bloodvine lily, and dreamroot with petals that shimmered in colors mortals had no words for. These plants did not grow from soil. They grew from memory, watered by old tears and first loves. Odin rarely emerged at dawn. Not anymore. Since his sacrifice on the tree, his mornings belonged to the quiet. He often sat alone in the high tower where the winds sang in 9 tongues. His ravens, Hugin and Munin, circled close, perching at times on the railings, but never settling for long. They were his messengers, yes, but also his memories, constantly departing, constantly returning. When he did descend, his steps were slow, and the air changed around him. The servants moved differently when he passed, not out of fear, but gravity. There was something in his presence now that bent the space slightly, like a stone resting on fabric. Each god held their own rhythm, tear-sharpened blades that never dulled, not because they needed it, but because doing so gave his hands purpose. Baldur walked the perimeter of Asgard each morning, greeting animals, touching bark, breathing deeply. He was the only one among them who smiled fully without pretense. He did not carry a weapon. His light, gentle and unwavering, came from a place the others could no longer reach. And perhaps that's why they loved him more than they feared him, and why his fate already whispered in the corners. The social order in Asgard was not enforced by rank or law. It was understood, unspoken, as natural as the movement of stars. Odin was chief, not by decree, but by vision. Frigg ruled through intuition. Thor guarded through sheer presence. Freya enchanted through proximity. Loki, though never claimed in full, occupied a space no one else could. Not a seat of power, but of influence. His words could shape mood, color thought, bend joy into anxiety. The gods knew this. They kept him close, not in trust, but in strategy. The meals, when they came, were ritual without rigidity. Long tables of polished ash wood stretched through the central hall, surrounded by high-backed chairs, carved with the stories of ages. No one was assigned a seat, but everyone sat in the same place. It was not tradition. It was weight. Gods belonged where their memories were thickest. Odin at the head, Frigg beside him. Thor across, Freya next to him. Loki ever so slightly removed. The food was endless. Boar roasted on self-regenerating flame. Bread that steamed as it was broken. Mead so sweet it made the tongue ache. But they ate slowly. There was no hunger. Only the act of honoring the act. Servants, not human, not quite divine, moved among them. Some were spirits of air, some of fire, some merely ideas clothed in shape. They did not speak. They anticipated. A goblet was never empty. A plate never scraped clean. Music, soft and directionless, came from no visible source. Harps, perhaps, or memory, or a god who once played and was now gone. No one questioned it. Between meals, the halls filled with lesser movement. Conversations that spiraled without urgency. Contests of riddle and rhythm. Planning sessions that blurred the line between prophecy and gossip. Thor might recount a fight in Jotunheim. Freya might tease a seer's vision. Loki might turn a phrase that made no sense until 3 days later. And Odin often said nothing. He would listen, tilt his head, narrow his eye, and once in a while ask a single question that unraveled an entire discussion. Yet even among gods, there were tensions, not in violence, but in glances, in long silences, in stories that lingered too long on certain names. The memory of betrayal clung to the air like old incense. Loki's children. Frigg's silence during Baldr's prophecy. The Vanir's presence among the Aesir. Once enemies, now kin, but never truly folded into one. Luxury did not erase distance. It amplified it. The further you sat from Odin, the less you knew what direction the wind blew. The further you stood from Frigg, the colder your tea became. The further you drifted from the center, the more you felt time creep back into the corners. Immortality in Asgard was not a gift equally shared. It was anchored, and those closest to the center drifted least. Even love was shaped by hierarchy. Marriage was a concept, but not a binding one. Odin had Frigg, but he also wandered. Freya loved, but rarely stayed. The gods touched, spoke, laughed, but rarely shared. Their bonds were formed through time, not need. Through memory, not promise. Evening came with amber light that never fully darkened. The sky shifted into layers of blue. And gold, never quite dusk, never fully night. It was the hour of mead and memory. The hour when songs were sung, not with instruments, but with voice. Gods did not sing for entertainment. They sang for truth. Each note echoed the version of themselves they once were, and might be again. Odin would hum, low, deep, like the earth itself sighing. Thor would sing in bursts, loud, uneven, joyful. Freya's voice floated, less melody, more mood. Loki rarely sang, but when he did, even the hearth dimmed. There were no beds in the sense mortals knew. Sleep was not required, but occasionally desired. Gods would drift, not always in rooms, but in places. Thor often lay beneath the stars, Mjolnir on his chest. Frigg disappeared entirely, her form dissolving into dream. Odin sat upright, eye half closed, 1 foot in vision, 1 in rest. Freya curled in the roots of her garden trees, cloak folded beneath her. And Loki, no one ever quite knew where he slept, or if he did. This was Asgard, a realm of endless ease, and yet not peace. There was no want, no pain, no need. But beneath the woven silence of the halls, fate moved, slow, patient, gathering. The gods, in all their comfort, were not blind. They simply looked away, until the day would come when even golden apples could not shield them. There was no feast waiting in Midgard, no golden benches, no meat reborn on the bone, no servants who moved on whispers. Only cold. It began in the bones, not just of people, but of the land itself. Stones were cold. Trees were cold. The wind came not just from the north, but from some other, older place. A place that had never known fire. And the people of Midgard, the mortals who looked to the skies with worn hands and cracked lips, lived beneath that cold every day of their lives. The gods were stories to them, but the weather was real. In the long winters, there were no songs, only breathing. The sound of wool against raw skin, the creak of frozen timber as roofs moaned under snow, the hiss of weak fires, fed with twigs too damp to catch. Children did not cry loudly. They learned quickly to be quiet, to conserve warmth. Mothers swaddled their infants with hair and herbs, whispering the names of Freya and Frigg, not in praise, but in pleading. And fathers, when present, walked out into storms, not knowing if they would come back with food, or with nothing at all. Survival was not a choice. It was a rhythm, and not everyone kept it. In summer, things changed, but not completely. The sun returned, low and long across the sky, but still distant. The ground softened, enough to plant, enough to dig. But even the soil was hungry. Crops grew with reluctance. Every meal eaten in summer was already measured against what would not be available come snow. Children ran, yes, barefoot and bright, but their shadows were still thin. No one ever truly fattened. There was joy, but it was measured. Laughter, but held short. No one ever forgot what waited at the edge of the seasons. The gods, they said, had made the world from a giant's corpse, and sometimes it still smelled like it. The seers, the Volar, knew this better than anyone. Women who walked alone, who carried staves carved with half-forgotten runes. They did not live in villages. They did not take husbands. They spoke to bones and stars. Some said they were touched by Odin. Others said they were half dead themselves. When a child was sick, or a harvest failed, or a war loomed, they were summoned, not welcomed, but endured. People feared what they might say more than what might happen. They did not comfort, they named. They told of things that could not be changed, only braced against. They looked at a baby and spoke of the age it would die. They looked at lovers and spoke of separations, long before affection faded. They looked at the sky and told you which winter would be the last. They were not cruel. They were correct, and that made them sacred. In the forests, men hunted not for sport, but for necessity. Elk, boar, even the rare bear, but prey grew smarter. The gods, after all, had given animals their own spirits. And those spirits learned, each arrow cost a life. Each missed shot meant something else would go hungry. When meat was brought home, it was not devoured. It was ritualized, shared with the gods first. A bone placed on a stone, a sliver burned. Even if no god answered, the offering remained, not because it worked, but because not doing it felt worse. The gods did not reply, but they watched, or so it was believed. War was not noble in Midgard. It was required. Clans fought not for conquest, but for wood, salt, honor, and sometimes weather. If a storm broke a roof and a neighbor had timber, violence became logic. Young boys learned to die before they learned to speak to girls. Axes were passed from father to son, not as gifts, but as sentences. Women fought too, not all, but many. Shield maidens did not call themselves that. They did not wear titles. They wore scars. And when a warrior fell, his family wept not just for loss, but for placement. Would he reach Valhalla? Would he be chosen? Or would he be lost in the void, forgotten, buried beneath ice, neither god nor beast? Valhalla was a promise dangled just beyond breath. A golden hall where the brave feasted endlessly, where wounds healed every night and battles were sport. But no one had seen it. Not truly. It was a story, told by firelight, repeated by aging mouths who had never held a sword. And yet, men bled for it, died hoping for it, and in the end were burned on ships that cracked in the waves, their ash scattered in wind, their names sung once, and then left behind. The gods did not come. Not for most, not visibly. And yet, their names were on everyone's tongue. Odin, the distant father, wise but cold. Thor, the protector, whose hammer cracked the skies. Freya, the soft one, the fierce one, the chooser of the fallen. Frigg, the watcher of hearths. Tyr, the oath keeper. Loki, the whisper at the door. They were everywhere, carved into lintels, etched into knives, whispered over childbirth and storm. But they were never here, never in the mud, never in the frost, never beside the dying, only above, always above. Children were taught their names before they learned their parents. Gods had stories before they had faces. A boy might know the tale of Thor's goats before he knew the name of the village elder. A girl might learn how Freya mourned her husband long before she learned how to grind grain. Faith came not from devotion, but from fear. You believed because not believing felt too dangerous. Lightning struck whether or not you prayed. So better to pray. The world below was shaped not by miracles, but by coping. You made your offerings. You burned the bones. You left coins for the dead. You sang to winds no one could see. You survived, day by day, hoping your name would live in a song. And if not that, then at least in memory. There was always a space between the gods and the people. Not a wall, not a bridge, just a space, widening slowly. It didn't begin with cruelty, not with punishment or war. It began with absence. The gods had what they needed. The people did not. And no one said anything. In Asgard, the apples never ran out. The mead never spoiled. The halls never cracked under ice. In Midgard, a bad winter could mean extinction. A single failed harvest, and a family of 7 might become 3. A sickness in the cow, and a baby goes without milk. One too early frost, and every buried hope turns black under the soil. And still, people looked upward. They prayed to Odin, not in anger, but in obedience. They told their children stories, not to explain suffering, but to give it shape, because shapeless suffering was harder to survive. The gods had their burdens, yes, war, prophecy, jealousy, the weight of knowledge, but they also had choice. Odin could disappear for weeks and return with wisdom. Freya could fly across the realms in her cloak of feathers, untouched by time. Thor could summon storm to his hand. Frigg could see the shape of what was coming and choose what to share and what to withhold. Even Loki, the eternal outsider, held the power to bend meaning, to twist truth, to light fires that no mortal could extinguish. But mortals, they could only endure. Some said the gods needed mortals, for belief, for legacy, for story. But others whispered it differently, that gods were born from the fears of men, that each thunderclap created a Thor, that every death in childbirth summoned Frigg, that Odin's eye was not sacrificed for the runes, but given by those who had already lost sight from years of staring into snow, hoping for a sign. And maybe both were true. Maybe the gods were real, and maybe they were mirrors. What is power when it's eternal? In Asgard, time did not erode things. It crystallized them. Odin never aged beyond his image. Thor never weakened. Freya's beauty did not fade. They became symbols, fixed points, predictable. And in that predictability, something shifted. Distance became indifference, and indifference became danger, because Midgard changed. People grew bolder, smarter, angrier. They began to ask different questions. Not, what will the gods give us? But, why do they not come? And the answers didn't come either. Only dreams, only riddles, only silence. And into that silence, Loki whispered. It started with jokes, then stories, then truths, buried inside laughter. He spoke of Asgard's halls while walking among fishermen. He told tales of Odin's selfishness at weddings. He taught children songs that mocked the very gods they once feared. And no one stopped him, because the gods were far, because they did not come down, because their feast never ended. The seeds of Ragnarok were not planted with swords. They were planted in inequity, in every prayer that went unanswered, in every child buried beneath frozen ground while the gods toasted immortality, in every burning offering that rose to the sky and fell back as ash. Mortals did not rebel. They simply remembered. They carried the weight. They told the stories, but each time a little colder, each time a little sharper, until belief itself became brittle, until loyalty cracked under hunger, until worship became a waiting game, not for blessings, but for reckoning. And when it came, it did not roar. It creaked, it rumbled. The roots of Yggdrasil stirred, not in power, but in pain, because the world tree bore all realms, and it had seen everything. Every child's frostbitten foot, every spilled drink in Valhalla, every unanswered whisper to the wind. The imbalance was not loud, it was patient. And the gods had not listened. Thor would fight. Odin would fall. Freya would weep. Loki would burn. But none of that had begun with battle. It had begun with forgetting. The gods forgot how cold it was down below, and the mortals remembered everything. So now, the 9 realms fall quiet again. The gods retreat into golden halls. The tree holds steady for now. The winds still carry the names of Odin, Freya, Thor, and Loki, but no one speaks them aloud tonight, because even stories need to sleep. You have walked through fire and frost, through feasts and famine, through the silence of sacrifice and the quiet thunder of fate. You have seen how gods remember and how mortals endure. And now there is nothing more to do. The torches have dimmed. The runes have faded into shadow. The mead is finished. Let the gods keep their watch. Let the stars hold your name. Let sleep carry you, gentle and slow, through the branches of Yggdrasil, until morning.